To be or not to be? Shakespeare asked the question 4 centuries ago. Honestly, I almost forgot about it, but recently kept me thinking deeper. Although I can't help wondering whether that if he were alive today, he might ask something entirely different. To think or merely to repeat? Have you ever noticed the most dangerous conversations? They never happen at noon. They happen after dessert. When somebody says, "Can I tell you something I have never told anyone?" And suddenly nobody checks their phone. Those are the conversations I live for, not because they are dramatic, because they are honest. They are the conversations where marriages are confessed to rather than, displayed. Where fathers become ordinary men, where successful people admit they are exhausted, where the loudest person at the table finally whispers, "I don't actually know anymore." I have often wondered why we wait until midnight to become truthful. Why, honestly, everything seems to require dim lighting, a half-empty wine glass, and the comforting possibility that strangers may never meet again. Perhaps daylight demands certainty, night permits doubt. And maybe that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because somewhere between confidence and confession, I think we have misplaced something precious. I am Rashmi and this is Anthropologically Yours. Tonight, I would like to ask you a question that has been following me for months. When was the last time you changed your mind? We are talking about finished people. And no, I am not talking about changing your phone or changing your hairstyle or your political party. Those are easy. I mean, when did a conversation rearrange something inside you? When did another human being leave you thinking, "I have been looking at this all wrong"? Can you remember? Because I can't remember the last time somebody admitted that to me. Instead, everybody seems wonderfully certain. The taxi driver, the professor, the influencer, the retired accountant, the football manager, the 23-year-old who's had exactly 3 jobs and somehow possesses definite opinions about civilization. Confidence has become the only language nobody feels embarrassed to speak, and certainty has become strangely seductive, which worries me. Because every beautiful love story I have ever known began with curiosity, not certainty. Every great friendship, every meaningful discovery, every child asking why, every scientist saying what if, every traveler boarding the wrong train and finding the right city. Curiosity has built more of civilization than certainty ever has. Yet somewhere along the way, we started treating changing our minds as though it were a public humiliation. How did that happen? Let's talk about the last time I was completely wrong. May I confess something? There was a version of me you probably wouldn't like that. She adored certainty. She mistook confidence for wisdom. She believed intelligent people had answers, good answers, quick answers, elegant answers. Looking back, I don't think she was intelligent at all. I think she was frightened because certainty feels wonderful. It removes the burden of wondering. It means never having to sit with uncomfortable questions, never having to apologize, never having to say, "I don't know." Then life, being life, developed a rather wicked sense of humor. It introduced me to people, real people, complicated people, the sort who refuse to fit inside neat little moral categories. And every time I met one, another certainty collapsed. The woman I thought I would dislike became one of the kindest people I had ever met. The man I admired broke someone's heart with astonishing carelessness. The loudest feminist I knew once admitted she judged women more harshly than men. A deeply religious friend confessed she had stopped believing years earlier but hadn't yet found the courage to tell her family. Life became increasingly inconvenient. Nothing stayed simple. Nothing remained black and white. People insisted on being gloriously contradictory. Then one evening, a friend asked me something over dinner. She said, "Do you know what frightens me the most?" I assumed she was going to say cancer or losing her parents or growing old. Well, she shook her head and said, "I am terrified that I have become the sort of person who never changes her mind." I had never considered that before. Most people fear losing themselves. They feared becoming permanently finished. I couldn't stop thinking about it because perhaps that is what certainty really promises: completion. A finished personality, a sealed identity, no more revisions, no more edits, no more uncomfortable surprises. But here's the problem: the most interesting people I have ever loved were impossible to finish reading. Every year they contradicted an earlier version of themselves. Every year they embarrassed a former opinion. Every year they outgrew another certainty, and perhaps that is what being fully alive actually looks like. It's not consistent. It's a continuous movement. Now this brings me to the next segment. The day she fell in love with a question. There is a woman I think about far more often than she probably realizes. No, that's not quite true. There are dozens of women and men. They simply happen to wear different faces. Their stories begin in different cities. Their names change. The ache never does. A woman once told me something I wasn't prepared to hear. She said, "I didn't go looking for another man." Then she smiled and in a very, with a very poker face, almost apologetically, said, "I went looking for myself." Those words, they disturbed me because I realized I had already judged her. I had built an entire courtroom inside my own head before she had ever finished her first sentence. Adultery, case closed. Verdict deliberate. Moral superiority, neatly folded and placed back into my handbag. Then she kept talking and the neat little story I had written for her collapsed. She had been married for 12 years. A good man, a decent father, nobody shouting, nobody drinking too much, nobody sleeping on somebody else's sofa. Nothing dramatic enough to interest the neighbors, which strangely enough made it harder to explain, because sometimes a marriage doesn't end with an explosion. Sometimes it simply evaporates, one ordinary Tuesday after another, until two people are sharing a postcode instead of a life. She said something I have never forgotten. She said, "Do you know what disappeared first?" I thought she would say intimacy or trust or laughter. Well, she said, questions. Nobody asked who I was becoming anymore. Nobody asked what frightened me or excited me anymore, or whether I had changed my mind about anything. The conversations became beautifully efficient, just about the bills, the children, the dentist, the boiler, Christmas with his parents, Sunday lunch with mine. We managed a household with extraordinary competence. We simply stopped discovering each other. Then one afternoon, a colleague asked her, "What are you reading?" That was it. 4 words, no flirting, no hidden agenda, no stolen glances across a restaurant, just, "What are you reading?" Well, she said she went to the toilet and cried because she couldn't remember the last time someone had asked a question whose answer couldn't be found on a family calendar. I have replayed that conversation in my head so many times because I don't think she fell in love with another man. I think she fell in love with being noticed. Those are very different things. One is about desire. The other is about existence. Before you disagree with me, let me tell you another story. A man once sat opposite to me, with a coffee growing cold between his hands. He told me he had never cheated, not once. He said it with quiet pride. Then he stared out of the window for a long time. "I have been faithful," he said. "I have just been absent." I asked him what he meant. He laughed. The sort of laugh people produce, when they are disappointed in themselves. "I left my marriage years ago," he said. My body stayed. I have never forgotten that sentence because it made me wonder whether there are 2 kinds of infidelity. The obvious ones, where a body leaves, and the quieter ones, where curiosity leaves first. Here's the dangerous, quite bold thought, to be honest. Perhaps we spend too much time asking, who did they sleep with? And not enough time asking, when did they stop feeling seen? Those questions don't excuse betrayal. They explain loneliness. Yes, there is a difference. Sometimes I wonder if the greatest luxury in a relationship isn't passion or sex or grand romantic gestures. Perhaps it's having somebody who still believes there is another version of you waiting to be discovered. Imagine that. 20 years together, and someone still asks, "What surprised you today? What are you ashamed of? What are you changing your mind about? Who are you becoming?" Perhaps that's what love is. Not finding someone who understands you completely, finding someone who refuses to stop trying. And perhaps that's why so many relationships don't collapse because of hatred. They collapse because curiosity packed its suitcase long before anybody else did. Now, this leaves me wondering if nobody changes their mind anymore. How many of us are sleeping beside people we stopped trying to discover 10 years ago? Many years ago. Well, okay, now, who told you that was about you? May I ask you something? And I would rather you didn't answer it immediately. Who are you? No. Not your name, not your profession, not the clever little sentence you use at networking events. Who are you when nobody is watching? I ask because I have become fascinated by a particular sentence. People say it all the time. "That's just who I am." Really? Says who? Who signed that document? Who decided that version of you at 25 should become your permanent edition? I met a man once, successful, funny, the sort of man who filled a room without trying. He had been married for almost 30 years. I asked him if he was happy. He answered, without looking up, "Happy enough." What an extraordinary phrase. And what a heartbreakingly British sentence. Entire empires have probably been built on happy enough. tiny, dry human. I wanted to shake him, not because I thought, he should leave his marriage or something, because I wondered, when did enough become his ambition? Then he said something I will never forget. I don't think my wife has met the real me. I asked him why. He laughed. Neither have I. That's what he said. That sentence has really haunted me ever since, because I suspect millions of us are introducing a stranger to the world every morning. We polish them, dress them, teach them what to say, what not to say, which opinions are acceptable, which dreams are childish, which emotions are embarrassing. Then we become so accustomed to playing the role. We mistake the performance for the person. Here's another story. A woman told me she had spent 20 years becoming everything she had promised she would be. The dependable daughter, the supportive wife, the exceptional mother, the reliable colleague. One afternoon, her husband asked, "What do you want?" What do you want? She burst in tears, not because she was emotional, because she genuinely didn't know. Nobody had asked her for a long time that she had stopped asking herself. Tell me, when did we become so frightened of changing? When did consistency become more admirable than honesty? Imagine telling your doctor, "I have had the same symptoms for 20 years and I am rather proud they haven't changed." Imagine saying that. "My taste in books hasn't evolved since university," or "I have never changed my opinions about love." We would think it's absurd, yet people boast about never changing their minds as though evolution were a character flaw. Gentlemen, I'm going to say something that may annoy you. If your wife says you have changed, don't defend yourself immediately. Ask her which part. She might be wrong. She might be absolutely right. Either way, you have just started a far more interesting conversation then. No, I haven't. And ladies, you are not escaping either. How many times have we introduced ourselves with an apology? "I am difficult, I am too much, I am too emotional," or "I am not very emotional, I am terrible at relationships." Who taught us to speak about ourselves as though we were warning labels? Imagine meeting a city for the first time and the first thing it says is, "Don't expect much." How heartbreaking. I think one of the cruelest thing we ever do to one another is decide we have finished learning them. That's when marriages begin collecting dust. Friendships become annual birthday texts. Parents, they stop asking questions because they think they already know the answers. Children stop telling the truth because nobody seems interested in hearing a new version. The tragedy isn't that people change. The tragedy is how often we punish them for it. A husband changes, midlife crisis. A wife changes, she's become difficult. A son changes, university filled his head with nonsense. A daughter changes, she used to be so sweet. Perhaps the people complaining aren't mourning the person you have become. Perhaps they are mourning the version of you that was easier for them to understand. Do you know what love sounds like to me now? Not, "I know you." No, it's not that. That sentence feels finished. Love sounds more like, "Tell me who you are today." Because tomorrow the answer might be different. And if it is, I hope someone loves you enough to ask again. Maybe that's why nobody changes their mind anymore. Changing your mind doesn't merely threatens an opinion, it threatens an identity. And identities are far more terrifying to lose than arguments. So, here talking about the most expensive thing you will ever own. Do you know what I think is the most expensive thing anyone ever buys? That's an identity. Not you don't buy that with money, you buy that with repetitions. You say something often enough and eventually it begins saying you. I am an alpha male, I'm a feminist, I'm conservative, I'm liberal, I'm spiritual, I'm atheist, I'm broken. One sentence repeated often enough, then one day it becomes impossible to ignore. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering you have been defending a version of yourself that died 10 years ago. Would you even notice, or would you continue arguing on behalf of a stranger? I sometimes think we collect identities the way children collect fridge magnets. Every holiday, every heartbreak, every promotion, every betrayal. Another one. Well, look, this is who I am now. Then one day the fridge door becomes so heavy it barely opens. A man once said something to me that sounded ordinary at first. I have voted for the same party all my life. He looked strangely proud, so I asked him why. He shrugged. My father did. I waited. He didn't say anything else. That was the whole answer. Imagine inheriting an opinion the way you inherit your grandmother's dining table. Never questioning whether it belongs in your house, simply polishing it every Sunday because that's what your family has always done. We inherit much stranger things than politics. We inherit silence, we inherit shame, we inherit ways of loving, ways of apologizing, ways of arguing, ways of pretending everything is fine. Sometimes we even inherit people we promise never to become, only to hear their voice emerging from our own mouth 30 years later. That is one of life's cruelest practical jokes. I wonder how many arguments have nothing to do with the argument. A husband says, "You are overreacting." His wife hears, "You are your mother." A wife says, "You are never here." Her husband hears, "You will never be enough." Nobody is discussing the dishes anymore, or the holiday, or the text message. They are defending old wounds, they're just dressed in fresh clothes. Here's something I have noticed. People rarely argue to understand. They argue to survive, because if the opinion dies, what happens to the person who built a life around it? That thought, it frightened me. Then it liberated me, because I realized something. Changing my mind doesn't erase the woman I used to be. It honors me. She believed the best she could with the life she had lived. Then life expanded. So did I. Why should I apologize for that? Do you know who impresses me now? It's not the clever person I met. It's the safest person. The person who can hear an opinion that collides headfirst with their own and doesn't reach for a weapon or sarcasm or a rehearsed speech. They simply lean forward and ask, "Help me understand how you arrived there." What extraordinary confidence that requires. Real confidence. The counterfeit version has all the answers. The genuine version has all the questions. Social media has taught us that every opinion deserves immediate publication. Life has been trying to teach us something else entirely. Some opinions deserve another week. Some deserve another year. Some deserve complete silence until we have lived enough life to understand what we are trying to say. I wish we admired that more. The sentence, "I have changed my mind." The sentence, "I don't know enough yet." The sentence, "I was wrong." Imagine if those became status symbols. Imagine the civilization we had built. Sometimes I think the strongest people I have met all shared one unusual habit. They kept editing themselves, not because, they were insecure or anything, because they were alive. Dead things don't evolve. Living things do. Forests, languages, cities, love, bodies, friendships, everything alive insists on becoming something else. Could be better, could be worse. Well, change is the only constant. Everything except human ego. Human ego dreams of becoming a museum, perfectly preserved, dust included. Maybe that's why museums are beautiful. You visit them, you admire them, then you know, something more, something less. But then you leave. Nobody wants to live inside one. So tell me, when was the last time you renovated your inner world? We are talking about you. When was the last belief you threw away because it was, no longer deserving in your mind? Because homes become beautiful for the same reason minds do. So when was the last time you threw away something from your room? Every so often someone has the courage to open the windows and let the old air escape. Yes. And can I ask you something? And promise me you won't answer too quickly. Who was the last person to change you? Not just to impress, not just to attract, but change you. I don't mean they recommend a better restaurant or a better reading list or persuaded you to, watch a television series. I mean, who left you unable to return to the person you were before you met them? If you have to think for a long time, that frightens me, because somewhere without realizing it, you may have stopped allowing people inside of you. You know what's curious? We spend our 20s hoping someone will change our life. We spend our 30s making absolutely certain nobody can. We become efficient, predictable, and 40s are absolutely a different ballgame altogether. And so the 50s, and it goes on. Predictable, expertly defended. We mistake emotional security for emotional closure. Then one day, we wake up beside someone we have loved for many years and realize we have been introducing them to yesterday's version of ourselves every single morning. Can I be brutally honest here? I don't think most marriages or relationships end because people stop loving. I think they end because people stop witnessing. There is a difference. Love can survive exhaustion. It can survive illness, distance, money, children, even betrayal. But very few relationships survive invisibility. Tell me, when did you last surprise your partner? Not just like flowers or a weekend away, with honesty. When did you last say, I have been pretending I am fine, or I am frightened, I have changed my mind, I don't know who I am anymore. Those sentences, they're terrifying, yes, and yet they are the very sentences intimacy has been waiting for. I have often wondered why strangers sometimes know more about us than the people sleeping beside us. Then I realized strangers ask different questions. They ask, what do you dream about? Where are you from? What do you miss? The people who love us eventually start asking, did you lock the back door? Have you paid the broadband? What time are we leaving? Necessary questions, hopelessly insufficient. So here's my fear. One day, two people will sit opposite each other in a restaurant. They will know each other's allergies, passwords, coffee orders, medical history, tax code, favorite side of the bed. They will know everything except the person. Because information isn't intimacy, recognition is. So tonight, Tonight, before you fall asleep, don't ask your husband whether he wants tea. Ask him what has changed inside you that you haven't told me. Don't ask your wife what time she's getting home. Ask her, what part of you have I stopped seeing? Don't answer your oldest friend how is work going. Ask, when did you last change your mind about something important? And then don't interrupt. You may meet someone entirely new. Maybe that's all love ever was, not finding the right person, remaining curious about the one who's already sitting across from you. Before I leave, may I ask one last favor? Tomorrow, when somebody says something you disagree with, don't rush to answer. Watch yourself. There is a moment, a tiny one, before the defense begins, before the interruption, before the clever reply you have rehearsed 100 times. Stay there just for a second, that tiny pause. Maybe the closest any of us come to freedom. And when you go home tonight, look at the people you think you know, your husband, your wife, your father, your daughter, your oldest friend, your roommate. And then ask yourself a question that feels almost absurd. Who are they becoming while I'm still treating them as who they used to be? And ask yourself something even more uncomfortable. Who am I becoming while everyone around me is still expecting yesterday's version of me? Perhaps that's why changing our minds feels so frightening. It isn't because opinions are difficult to surrender. It's because every opinion carries a little piece of our identity. Every certainty whispers, if you let me go, who will you become? I don't know the answer, and for once I'm perfectly content not knowing, because I have started to suspect that the most interesting people never, arrive with a certain answer. They remain beautifully unfinished, still asking, still listening, still capable of surprise. Maybe wisdom has nothing to do with collecting answers. Maybe wisdom is reaching an age where you are no longer embarrassed by your questions. So if this conversation lingers after tonight, if it follows you into the kitchen tomorrow morning, or appears halfway through an argument, or sits beside you on the river drive to work, don't try to get rid of it. Because some questions are not looking for answers. They are looking for a company. I'm Rashmi, and this has been Anthropologically Yours. Until next time, stay unfinished. Take care.